She threw herself between two men without thinking, her body trembling as fists flew past her face and the entire dining room fell silent. The stranger she protected wore a torn jacket, while the man attacking him wore a $10,000 suit and a sneer that promised consequences. When security dragged her outside and her manager fired her on the spot, she realized her life had just shattered over a man she didn't even know. But as he stood in the rain beside her, watching her cry, she whispered something that made him close his eyes. "I'd do it again." Would you risk everything to protect a stranger, even if no one would ever know? This is where everything truly began. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she balanced the tray of champagne glasses, each one catching the light from the crystal chandeliers above. The Azure wasn't just a restaurant, it was a statement. A place where millionaires came to feel like billionaires, where every surface gleamed with gold trim and polished marble, where people like Sarah were meant to be invisible. She'd perfected that invisibility over 3 years. Smile, serve, disappear. Never make eye contact too long. Never ask questions. Never, ever get involved in the lives of the people who could afford a single meal here that cost more than her monthly rent. But tonight, something felt wrong. Sarah could feel it in her bones, in the way her hands trembled slightly as she set down the glasses. Table 7 had been tense since the moment the two men arrived. The younger one, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Sarah's entire wardrobe, had been speaking in sharp, cutting tones. His voice carried across the dining room like shards of broken glass. The older man sitting across from him looked small, defeated, his shoulders hunched as if trying to make himself disappear into the leather chair. Sarah had seen cruelty before. God knows she'd lived through enough of it. Her father's rage-filled eyes before he left. Her mother's quiet tears when the bills piled up. The landlord's cold smile when he threatened eviction. But there was something about the way this older man flinched with each harsh word that made Sarah's stomach twist into knots. She tried to focus on her work, tried to remind herself that this wasn't her business, that getting involved would only bring trouble. She needed this job. Desperately. Her mother's cancer treatment had drained every penny they had, and Sarah was barely holding their world together with minimum wage and tips. "You're pathetic," the younger man hissed, his words dripping with venom. "You think you can just walk in here and what? Embarrass me? Make me look weak in front of these people?" The older man's hands shook as he reached for his water glass. "Marcus, please. I just wanted to talk. I just wanted..." "You wanted what? To remind everyone that you're a failure? That you're nothing?" Marcus's laugh was cold, empty, the kind of laugh that had no joy in it. Only cruelty. Sarah's chest tightened. She could feel tears burning behind her eyes, though she didn't fully understand why. Maybe it was because she saw her own mother in that older man's defeated posture. Maybe it was because she knew what it felt like to be small and powerless while someone towered over you with words designed to cut and maim. She set down her tray with trembling hands, her mind screaming at her to walk away, to stay silent, to survive. Then Marcus stood up. The chair scraped against the floor with a sound like a scream, and suddenly every conversation in the restaurant died. The piano music continued, but it felt hollow, meaningless. Marcus reached across the table and grabbed the older man by his collar, yanking him half out of his seat. "You don't belong here. You never did." And that's when Sarah moved. She didn't think. She didn't calculate the cost. She just ran forward, her heart exploding in her chest, her vision tunneling until all she could see was Marcus's hand clenched in that worn jacket. "Stop." Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence. "Please, just stop." Marcus turned to her, and the look in his eyes made Sarah's blood run cold. Pure contempt. The kind of look that said she was less than nothing, less than the dirt on his expensive shoes. "Excuse me?" His voice was dangerously quiet. Sarah's legs felt like water, but she forced herself to stay standing. "Let him go. Please. You're hurting him." "Who the hell do you think you are?" Marcus's grip tightened on the older man's collar, and Sarah watched the color drain from the man's face. "You're a waitress. You're nobody. So do your job and stay out of things that don't concern you." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Nobody. She'd heard that word her whole life. From teachers who didn't care. From doctors who kept her mother waiting for hours. From people who looked right through her as if she didn't exist. And maybe they were right. Maybe she was nobody. But even nobodies had a choice. Even nobodies could decide to do something. I know I'm nobody, Sarah said, her voice shaking but growing stronger. But that doesn't make this right. Let him go. For a moment, something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or calculation. Then his face twisted with rage. He shoved the older man back into his chair so hard it tipped backward, and before Sarah could react, Marcus grabbed her wrist. His fingers dug into her skin like iron claws, and pain exploded up her arm. She gasped, tried to pull away, but his grip was too strong. You want to be a hero? Let's see how that works out for you. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but she didn't look away. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Through the pain, through the fear, she kept her eyes locked on his. You can hurt me, she whispered. But you're still wrong. Then the older man was there, his hand closing around Marcus's wrist. His voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. Something ancient and immovable. Let her go, Marcus. For the first time, Sarah saw fear flash across Marcus's face. Real fear. He released her wrist as if she'd burned him, and Sarah stumbled backward, cradling her arm. Marcus straightened his suit, his composure cracking at the edges. You're both insane. He looked around at the silent restaurant, at all the witnesses to his loss of control, and his face flushed dark red. You'll regret this. He stormed out, his footsteps echoing like gunshots. Sarah stood frozen, her wrist throbbing, her mind unable to process what had just happened. The older man looked at her, and his eyes were filled with something Sarah couldn't name. Or maybe, or guilt. Are you all right? He asked softly. Before Sarah could answer, her manager appeared, his face purple with rage. Mr. Henderson had never liked her, had always looked for reasons to criticize, to belittle. Now he looked triumphant. What the hell did you just do? Sarah's voice came out small, broken. I was just trying to help. You embarrassed a VIP guest. You caused a scene in my restaurant. You're done here. Get out. The words didn't make sense at first. Sarah stared at him, her mind sluggish, trying to catch up. What? You're fired. Get your things and leave. Now. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Sarah's feet. Fired. The word echoed in her head, each repetition driving the reality deeper. No job. No money. No way to pay for her mother's treatment or the rent or food or anything. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, pale and weak, apologizing for being sick, for being a burden. Sarah had promised her everything would be okay. She'd promised they'd get through this together. She turned to the older man, desperate for him to say something, to fix this somehow. But he just stood there, his face pale, his eyes filled with that same unbearable sadness. Sarah felt something break inside her chest. She'd thrown away everything for a stranger who couldn't even speak up for her. She walked to the back room on legs that didn't feel like her own. Her hands shook as she grabbed her coat from the locker, as she stuffed her few belongings into her bag. The other staff members looked away, embarrassed or uncomfortable or just relieved it wasn't them. Sarah wanted to scream, to cry, to break something. But she just kept moving one foot in front of the other, because if she stopped, she'd collapse completely. The rain hit her the moment she stepped outside, cold and merciless, soaking through her thin coat within seconds. Sarah stood on the sidewalk, staring at the empty street, and finally let herself feel it. The fear. The despair. The crushing weight of knowing she'd just destroyed her life for someone who might not even remember her name tomorrow. She wrapped her arms around herself and sobbed, her whole body shaking with the force of it. Wait, please wait. Sarah turned, wiping uselessly at her face. The older man stood in the rain beside her, his worn jacket already soaked through, his gray hair plastered to his head. He looked smaller out here, older, more fragile. I'm so sorry, he said, and his voice cracked. This is my fault. All of it? Sarah shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. You lost your job because of me. You stood up for me when you didn't have to, when it cost you everything, and I... He stopped, his eyes glistening with tears that mixed with the rain. I don't even know your name. Sarah, she whispered. Sarah. He said it like a prayer. I'm Jonathan. And I need you to know something. What you did in there, what you risked, most people would have looked away. Most people would have protected themselves. But you didn't. You saw someone hurting and you couldn't stand by. That takes a kind of courage most people don't have. Sarah's chest ached. It doesn't matter. I still lost everything. It matters, Jonathan said fiercely. It matters more than you know. He reached into his pocket and pulled out some wet bills. Please. At least let me help. Let me give you something for... No. Sarah stepped back, shaking her head. The word came out harder than she intended. I didn't do it for money. I know. I know you didn't. But you're struggling, I can see it, and... I'll be okay. Sarah forced the words out, even though she didn't believe them. I've been through worse. I'll find another job. I always do. Jonathan stared at her, and something in his expression broke. He lowered his hand, the money hanging limp in his fingers. You really mean that? I have to mean it. Sarah's voice was barely audible over the rain. Because if I don't, I'll fall apart. And I can't fall apart. My mom needs me. They stood there in the rain, two broken people held together by a moment of unexpected humanity. Finally, Jonathan nodded. Can I at least get you a cab? Get you somewhere dry? Sarah was so tired. So cold. She nodded. Jonathan made a call, and within minutes, a black car pulled up. Not a taxi. Something nicer. Sarah was too exhausted to question it. Jonathan opened the door for her, and she climbed inside, grateful to be out of the rain. He leaned down, his eyes meeting hers. The world needs more people like you, Sarah. People who do the right thing even when it costs them everything. Don't let tonight make you bitter. Don't let it change who you are. Sarah's throat tightened. That man, Marcus. He's your son, isn't he? Jonathan flinched as if she'd struck him. Yes. He is. I'm sorry. For whatever happened between you. I'm sorry he treated you like that. Jonathan's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. For seeing me. For caring when no one else did. He stepped back and closed the door gently. As the car pulled away, Sarah watched him through the rain-streaked window. He stood alone on the sidewalk, getting smaller and smaller, until he was just a shadow in the rain. And Sarah cried. She cried for her lost job, for her sick mother, for the impossible future stretching out before her. But somewhere beneath the fear and the pain, she felt something else. Something small but unbreakable. She'd done the right thing. And somehow, even as her world fell apart, that mattered. Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of her apartment, and for one blissful moment, she forgot. Then reality crashed down like a tidal wave. No job. No prospects. $237 in her bank account and rent due in 12 days. Her mother's medication running low. The weight of it pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. She forced herself out of bed, made coffee she couldn't afford, and opened her laptop with shaking hands. The job search felt like screaming into a void. Apply, apply, apply. Send out your hope and desperation into the digital darkness and pray someone, somewhere, sees you as more than a resume, more than a number. By the end of the day, Sarah had applied to 32 positions. By the end of the week, she'd received 17 rejections and silence from the rest. The silence was worse than the rejections. At least a rejection was an answer. The silence just left you hanging, wondering if anyone even saw you at all. Sarah started skipping meals. Just breakfast at first. Then lunch. She told herself she wasn't hungry, that she was fine, even as her hands started to shake and her head felt light. She called her mother every night, forcing brightness into her voice, lying about job interviews that didn't exist and opportunities that weren't coming. Her mother's voice grew weaker with each call, the pauses between words stretching longer. Are you eating enough, sweetheart? Her mother would ask, and Sarah would lie, smile in her voice, heart breaking in her chest. On the 10th day, Sarah got a call back. A diner called Rosie's on the edge of town needed a night shift waitress. The pay was barely above minimum wage. The hours were brutal. But it was something. Sarah cried when she hung up the phone, Relief and grief tangled together so tightly she couldn't separate them. The work at Rosie's was hard in ways the Azure never was. The customers were tired, frustrated, some of them cruel in small, cutting ways. They snapped at her over cold coffee. They left messes and no tips. They looked through her like she was furniture. But Sarah showed up every night, her feet aching, her body exhausted, her heart somehow still beating. She thought about Jonathan sometimes, wondered if he was okay, if Marcus had hurt him again. She hoped he'd found peace somehow. 3 weeks after that terrible night, Sarah was wiping down a table near closing time, her mind foggy with exhaustion, when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up and her heart stopped. Marcus walked in, his expensive coat pristine, his expression smug. He looked around the diner with obvious disgust, his lip curling, and when his eyes landed on Sarah, they lit up with cruel satisfaction. He walked over and sat at her table, his movements deliberate, predatory. Whoa. Look where the hero ended up. Sarah's hands tightened around the dish rag, her knuckles white. She could feel her heart hammering, could feel the old fear creeping up her spine. But she wouldn't let him see it. Not this time. What do you want, Marcus? His smile widened. Just wanted to see how you were doing. Heard you got fired from the Azure. Such a shame. And now you're here, in this dump, serving people who probably can't even afford to tip you. Must be quite a fall from grace. Sarah set down the dish rag, her jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Is that all? Because I have work to do. You had work to do at the Azure too. But you couldn't help yourself, could you? Had to play the hero. Had to defend my pathetic excuse for a father. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping. Did it feel good? Throwing away your life for a stranger? Sarah met his eyes, and she saw it clearly now. The emptiness. The cruelty born from some deep wound he'd never let heal. She'd been afraid of him that night, terrified even. But now, looking at him in the harsh fluorescent lights of a cheap diner, she just felt sad. Sad for him. Sad for Jonathan. Sad for all the ways people hurt each other and called it strength. Your father isn't pathetic, Sarah said quietly. He's kind. He's gentle. He's everything you're not. Marcus's smile vanished. His face flushed dark red. You don't know anything about him. Or me. I know enough. I know you're so insecure that you have to tear people down to feel big. I know you're so empty inside that cruelty is the only thing that makes you feel alive. Sarah's voice was steady now, strong. Your father might not have fancy suits or money or power, but he has something you'll never have. He has a good heart. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair screeching across the floor. His hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Sarah thought he might hit her. Part of her almost wished he would, just so everyone could see what he really was. But he just leaned close, his breath hot on her face. You're going to regret saying that? Maybe. Sarah didn't flinch. But at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Can you? His jaw worked, rage and something else, shame, maybe, flashing across his face. Then he turned and stormed out, the door slamming behind him hard enough to rattle the windows. Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank into the nearest chair, her whole body shaking. Her manager, Rosie, came out from the back, her weathered face concerned. You okay, honey? Sarah nodded, even though she wasn't sure. Yeah. Just another bad customer. But that night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, Sarah felt something shift inside her. She'd stood up to Marcus again. She'd told him the truth, even knowing he could hurt her, even knowing he probably would try. And she'd survived it. She was still here. Still fighting. For days later, Sarah came home from her shift to find an envelope taped to her door. Plain white, no return address. Just her name written in careful, elegant handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it inside her apartment, her heart pounding. Inside was a letter and a check. The check made her gasp, her vision swimming. $20,000. She read the number 3 times, certain she was seeing it wrong. But no. $20,000. The letter was written on thick paper, the handwriting the same careful script from the envelope. Dear Sarah, I know you'll want to refuse this. I know that accepting money goes against everything you did that night. You helped me because it was right, not because you expected anything in return. That's exactly why I'm sending it to you. That night in the rain, you told me you'd done the right thing, and that was all that mattered. I've thought about those words every day since. You lost everything to protect a stranger. You stood up when everyone else looked away. You showed me what real courage looks like. I'm not offering you a job. I'm not trying to rescue you or change your life. You don't need rescuing. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. But your mother is sick. I saw it in your eyes that night, the fear, the desperation. I heard it in your voice when you said you'd been through worse. No one should have to choose between doing the right thing and taking care of the people they love. This money isn't payment for what you did. It's just one person trying to help another, the way you helped me. Please use it for your mother's treatment. Give yourself a chance to breathe. You taught me something that night, Sarah. You reminded me that kindness doesn't need a reason. That compassion isn't transactional. That sometimes we act simply because we must, because our hearts won't let us do anything else. I'm working on things with Marcus. Trying to teach him what I should have taught him years ago. Trying to show him that power without compassion is just cruelty. I don't know if it's too late, but I have to try. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for caring when no one else did. Thank you for reminding me what it means to be human. The world needs more people like you, Sarah. People who do the right thing not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Take care of yourself. Take care of your mother. And know that what you did mattered. More than you'll ever know. With deepest gratitude, Jonathan. Sarah read the letter 5 times, tears streaming down her face, her chest so tight she could barely breathe. She wanted to refuse it. Wanted to prove she really had done it for the right reasons, that she didn't need anything in return. But then her phone rang, and it was her mother, and Sarah could hear how weak she sounded, how tired. Sarah, honey, I don't want you to worry, but the doctor said we need to start the next round of treatment soon, and I know we don't have the money, so maybe we could. Mom. Sarah's voice cracked. We have it. We have the money. Her mother was silent for a long moment. Then, what? How? Someone helped us. Someone who believes in doing the right thing. Sarah looked at the check through her tears. We're going to be okay, Mom. I promise. We're going to be okay. Her mother sobbed, and Sarah sobbed with her, and for the first time in months, the crushing weight on Sarah's chest lifted just enough to let her breathe. The next morning, Sarah went to work at Rosie's. She didn't quit. She didn't suddenly change her life. She just kept showing up, kept working, kept treating people with kindness even when they didn't deserve it. The money was for her mother, not for her to escape. And honestly, Sarah didn't want to escape. She'd learned something important. That dignity wasn't about what job you had or how much money you made. It was about how you treated people when no one was watching. About the choices you made when it cost you everything. 2 months passed. Sarah's mother started her treatment, and the doctors were hopeful. Sarah kept working at Rosie's, kept sending money home, kept living her simple life. She thought about Jonathan every day, wondered if he was okay, if things had changed with Marcus. She hoped so. She hoped her small act of kindness had rippled out somehow, created something better in the world. Then one morning, Sarah was refilling coffee when she noticed the newspaper someone had left on the counter. A headline caught her eye, and her heart stopped. Billionaire Jonathan Gray announces major company restructuring. Son Marcus Gray steps down from all executive positions. Sarah's hands shook as she picked up the paper. There was a photo of Jonathan, but he looked different. Stronger. His eyes were clear, determined, alive in a way they hadn't been that night in the rain. The article talked about ethics reforms, about charitable donations, about a complete overhaul of company culture. And at the bottom, there was a quote from Jonathan that made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. I was reminded recently by a very brave person that true character isn't shown when people are watching. It's shown in the moments when we think no one will ever know. I want to build a company that embodies that principle. That does the right thing not for recognition or profit, but because it's the only thing worth doing. Sarah carefully tore out the article and tucked it into her apron pocket, right over her heart. That night, walking home under the streetlights, Sarah thought about kindness. About how a single moment could change everything. About how doing the right thing mattered even when it cost you. Especially when it cost you. She'd lost her job at the Azure. She'd stood up to Marcus twice. She'd risked everything for a stranger. And she'd do it all again. Because some things were more valuable than security or money or comfort. Some things were worth protecting. Worth fighting for. Worth sacrificing for. Kindness. Dignity. Compassion. The simple, radical act of seeing another person's humanity and refusing to look away. Sarah smiled as she unlocked her apartment door, tears running down her face, but they were good tears this time. Her mother was getting better. Her job was honest. Her conscience was clear. And somewhere in the city, a billionaire was trying to be a better man, trying to teach his son about compassion, all because a waitress named Sarah had shown him what real courage looked like. The world wasn't fair. Sarah had learned that a long time ago. But it could still be kind. And sometimes, that kindness rippled out in ways you'd never see, touching lives and changing hearts and making the darkness just a little bit brighter. Sarah fell asleep that night with the newspaper article on her nightstand and peace in her heart. She'd done the right thing. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Sometimes the greatest impact we make isn't measured in money or recognition or reward. It's measured in the quiet moments when we choose compassion over comfort, when we choose courage over safety. It's in the simple act of refusing to look away when someone needs us, even when the cost is everything. And it's in remembering that kindness is never wasted, even when we never see where it goes. If this story touched your heart, there are more stories of courage, compassion, and the power of doing what's right waiting for you on this channel. Have you ever done the right thing even though it cost you something important? Share your story in the comments. If Sarah's story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us what it means to be truly human. Thanks for loving Reddit Storyteller.